Welcome to Your Career Unscripted. I'm your host, Jane Bernhard. I will be interviewing business leaders and recent graduates on the different perspectives, strategies, challenges, and advice on building meaningful careers across different generations. There's no right way to build your career or live your life. And I'm so excited that this show is in collaboration with Texas Immersive Institute at the University of Texas. We hope to help you define success on your terms and not anyone else's. Our first guest is Shawn Layden. Layden is the former chairman of PlayStation Worldwide Studios for Sony Interactive Entertainment, SIE, where he was responsible for driving first-party content to differentiate the PlayStation platform and played a key role in launching PlayStation consoles globally. He also established PlayStation Productions in Culver City to create film and television properties based on PlayStation's game IP. Prior to serving as chairman, Layden was CEO of SIE America, leading the PlayStation business in the United States, Canada, and Latin America. Earlier in his career, he also served as president of SIE Japan and was vice president for international software development at SIE Europe. His 32-year career with Sony began with corporate roles in Tokyo, including 5 years as personal assistant to Akio Morita, co-founder of Sony Corporation. He currently serves as a strategic advisor to Tencent Corporation, as well as advising several tech startups in game-adjacent fields. He's a founding board member of the Girls Make Games Scholarship Fund. Layden graduated from the University of Notre Dame with a BA in American Studies. He has family in Tokyo and London and divides his time amongst those cities and the San Francisco Bay Area, where he currently resides with his 2 cats. He still plays a lot of video games. Hi, Shawn. I am so excited to have you as my first guest on the podcast. I've been thinking about doing this for a very long time, and I wanted to be very intentional about how I kick things off. I'm so honored that you would be a part of this. I wanted you to be a first guest, not just because of your incredibly successful and interesting career, but also because you are very committed to giving back to other people and to younger generations. You're on the board of many nonprofits. You've given me advice before, and you're just a very kind and generous person. And so I'm very excited to kind of share your story and ask you questions, learn more about you, and hopefully inspire other people as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Jane. And after an introduction like that, we should just stop the podcast right here because I can't get any better than what you just said. So, but yes, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm really intrigued by your project and what you're trying to pull together to help people navigate their way through the world around us. It's something that when I reached my retirement, or semi-retirement, I guess you call it, I realized the only 2 commodities or faculties that I had, which were still vibrant and useful, I think, and are difficult to come by, is you have to be my age to know as many people as I do. You just can't know these many people when you're 30 years old. The second thing is you have to be my age to make as many mistakes as I've made. And this is the time of my career where I, so to speak, I monetize my mistakes. People will pay me money to hear how the plane was crashing, and I almost crashed the plane, but they want to know, how did you prevent the plane crash? So you have to make the mistake to have the epic hero moment. And you've got to be pretty old to have a few of those to talk about.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm sure whoever ends up listening to this will appreciate hearing about challenges as well as your successes. So I'm really excited to kick things off. And to start off the conversation, you were at Sony for over 30 years. That is quite a ride. You started as a producer and you moved all the way up to president and CEO and then chairman of Sony Interactive Entertainment, Worldwide Studios. I've heard you say on another interview that you made your career out of always saying yes. I'm wondering if you can tell us about the moves you made along the way, how you decided to make those moves, and whether you think it was that mentality and that tenacity to take on new challenges that contributed to where you are now.
Well, thank you for that. And as point of fact, my 32-year career with Sony, which began in 1987, I began in corporate. We didn't have a game division in 87. So I flew to Tokyo. I got a job with Sony headquarters in Japan. And though we didn't have the terminology at the time, if I look back on it now, I could see I was a diversity hire. Sony wanted to internationalize their Japanese headquarters, and they did that by hiring about 20 non-Japanese to come and work. And I was put in a department of about 75 people in corporate communications. And so my first job there was to be a PR guy with all the foreign publications, which had bureaus in Japan. Remember, this is before the internet. So everybody, the Washington Post had 10 people there. New York Times had probably 25 people there, covering the news coming out of Japan, because late 80s, early 90s, Japan was a real hot topic, right? All these books coming out about Japanese management and how Japanese money is going to rule the world. And so it was kind of a place for, young graduates to seek their fortune. So I went over to Japan, became a PR guy, did that for 2 or 3 years. During that time, Sony bought CBS Records, and I was able to be on the team that led the acquisition of Columbia Pictures. And then about 3 years in, I got a tap on the shoulder from the chief of staff to the founder of Sony, the founder being Akio Morita. Chief of staff came and asked me, the chairman needs a new speechwriter, and he wants to pull you out of the PR department to be his speechwriter. And my boss in PR at the time, vociferously argued against it. Don't go there. You work 8 days a week. You work 90 hours a day. They're going to kill you up there. And I had to say to him, I can't say no, because how often does the CEO and the founder of a corporation reach down into the PR department to pull somebody out? If I said no, I'd spend the rest of my life regretting it, thinking about what if I had said yes. So I said yes. And I became secretary and speechwriter to Akio Morita for 5 years. And that was amazing. That's a whole Netflix miniseries in and of itself. But then the chairman, he fell ill and he had to retire. And another fellow came over to me and said, hey, I see that the chairman's retiring, and we've got this new company called Sony Computer Entertainment. Why don't you come over with us? We're making video games. And I said, I don't know anything about video games. And that's when the president of the new company, Tokunaka-san, said to me, well, that's good, because none of us do either. So we're all going to learn together. And it's like, okay, then. And so said yes again, because it's an adventure, and what's it going to be like? And we didn't have full-throated support from Sony Corp, though. They thought it was a bit of a lark, and they said Nintendo and Sega own this sector. I don't know what you guys think you're going to do in that space. But with the fearlessness of the uneducated, we went running into that fire. And I'd say we were pretty successful. They asked me to be a game producer. I said, I don't know what that is. And they said, oh, you'll figure it out. And so that happened then. And then a few years later, we bought a company called Psygnosis Limited, which was an enormous European gaming company. And they sent me to England to integrate the asset, post-acquisition. So, okay, I've never done that before, but, how hard could it be? And moved my family to England. And I was there for 9 years, producing games. We bought a couple more studios until the boss called me in 2007 when I was in Liverpool, standing on a train platform, and said, hey, it's time for you to come back to Japan. And my reaction was, well, we just hired a head of studios for Japan, so I don't know what I would do if I went there. We want you to be president of Sony Computer Entertainment Japan, the sales and marketing arm for the domestic Japanese market. And I had to laugh. And the CEO in Tokyo said, why are you laughing? And I said, how bad is the situation that you think it's a good idea to get the American game producer from England to come to Japan and run domestic sales and marketing? I mean, just how bad is it? And he said to me, you couldn't make it any worse. So with the bar set appropriately low, I went back to Japan in 2007 to run sales and marketing, which I'd never done before in my life. I'd never sold a thing. But again, how hard can it be? That's what I keep telling myself throughout my career, was just, well, how hard could it be? Other people are doing it, so it can't be impossible. So we did that for 3 years and brought the company back to profitability. And then I got sent to San Francisco 3 years later to want you to start a new company called Sony Network Entertainment. You've got 4 months to get it filed and incorporated. Okay, never done that before. So I flew to San Francisco and we set up a company and we got off the ground. We managed the PlayStation Network and we suffered the massive PlayStation hack of 2011, which took years off my life. And then in 2014, they asked me to be the CEO of Sales and Marketing for America. So these kind of things, in my entire 32 years at Sony, I only applied for one job. The first one that got me there. Now, Japanese companies are a bit more hands-on with career development of people they think that can do more things in the company. But yeah, every job I took is because I was asked, and I just said yes.
Wow. So thank you for sharing that. It's very inspiring. I think it'll also inspire people to kind of jump on board of things that are very new and daunting and things that they're not completely sure about. I'm curious what your experience was learning new skills along the way. So you're a producer. You said you hadn't done that before. How did you kind of embrace that? What was your perspective on learning? And then as you moved up into leadership roles, I imagine the responsibilities change. Clearly, you have a very strong growth mindset, but how did you learn to move into leadership? How did you learn negotiation skills? And how did you kind of cultivate this perspective on, okay, I don't know this, I'm going to figure it out, and this is how I'm going to figure it out?
In Japan, when you become an apprentice to a sushi chef, they take you in and you spend the first year sweeping and cleaning. You don't touch the fish in the first year. You don't even touch the rice in the first year. But you just get to know your way around the shop, and then you slowly level up across that. But the interesting thing about that is the chef doesn't teach you anything. Don't take the time to say this is how you hold your knife and this is how you cut the fish, and this is where you put it. In fact, the verb they use to describe what happens in that situation, they don't use the word to teach or to learn. They use the verb nisumu, which means to steal. The job as the apprentice is to steal the skills from the chef. You've got to watch. You've got to have a really keen eye and a really keen ear. Every little nuance, you've just got to be switched onto. You have to steal your skills from other people. So as a game producer, I went around to try to steal producing skills from other producers. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Oh, okay. Maybe it was a bit annoying because I was going around asking a lot of questions, but people were more than happy to help. I think in the end, there are more people in the world who wish to see others succeed than there are people in the world who wish to see others fail. And if you can appeal to that good nature in most human beings, they won't sit down and teach you the whole thing. But if you ask them a couple of questions, they'll give you a couple of answers, and you just have to start, amalgamating all of that to come up with what kind of game producer am I going to be then if I've learned all these things about that. Same with doing sales and marketing. Never did that before. Have seen it happen. Have some understanding of the mechanics of it. But again, just find people in that field who are knowledgeable and can spend just a little bit of time. I never wanted the whole answer from anybody because I know that's going to be tedious for them. But just give me a couple of pieces right now, and I'll come back with better questions next time. So, yeah, it's the curiosity of it. It's dare I say, there's a bit of courage around it. If you feel that even if I totally fail, I'm not going to die. So there really is no existential threat. People talk about, oh, it's so stressful making these decisions about this game. And I said, no. Stressful is being a neurosurgeon, deciding which part of the lobe you're going to cut. That is stress, right? Deciding whether to put 2-player in your game or not. It's not a stressful decision. Just make a decision and move on. Do what you think is right. Do what feels right. Listen to your instincts. When stuff feels wrong to you, it's probably wrong. You may not know exactly why, but trust your instincts. If your instincts say, I'm going to go do this thing, and all your friends are saying, wow, that's going to be a failure. If you feel strong enough about it, go and do it. Because again, you don't want the regrets 10 years later about, what if I had done that? So most things will not kill you. So just give it a try.
I love that. And on the topic of your curiosity and your willingness to ask questions, that's something that I've tried to embrace as I've kind of pivoted careers. I was an actor before I went to business school, and then I get to business school and I'm in corporate finance, accounting, and economics. And it took me months into those classes to push myself to ask questions that I needed answers to, because I was so self-conscious around my peers who had been in those industries for 7 years. Right. But I got to the point where I was so lost that I just had to ask for help and ask those questions. And once I started doing that, that's kind of when I had a breakthrough in actually understanding the curriculum. And then I realized, first of all, people do want to help. If I slow things down a little bit, I'm probably helping like 3 or 4 other people also lost. I do think it takes a bit of courage to kind of put yourself out there and perhaps ask questions that are very easy to other people if they've been doing something for a long time.
Mhm.
So what would you say to someone, whether they're a student or someone who comes into a new role, who's afraid to ask those questions, who has a lot of questions and they want to come off as very knowledgeable, but at the same time, they need advice and they need mentorship, and they're balancing getting answers to what they actually need with, cultivating a perception of intelligence and grit and determination. Do you have advice for someone who's insecure about their own curiosity?
Yeah. That actually describes a lot of the workforce. And I think all of us, myself included, till my last day with Sony, 32 years on, still have imposter syndrome. I was always waiting for someone to come in and go, "You're not running this like a real chairman. Get out of that chair." and so it's always gonna have a little bit of that, but don't let that, overpower you. The people who ask questions, I think, are appreciated. To your point, one person asks a question, but there may be 8 people who really wanted to ask it. And so there's a benefit to all. And asking questions is definitely not a sign of weakness. Being able to stand up and say, "I don't understand this thing because of these reasons, and can someone help me understand it?" That's pretty strong. That's pretty tough. You're going to stand up and, expose yourself to everyone as not knowing this bit. And then you're going to get the answer and you're going to master it, and you'll be fine. I've never heard anybody sit back and complain later, "Jesus, Charlie's just asking questions all day long." It's the ones who don't that we worry about. It's like, "You guys get it?" Silence. That's when I worry about, "Oh, you didn't get it." If you're asking a couple of questions around the perimeter of the idea, then I go, "Oh, so you have the core. You're just trying to figure out these aspects of it." But I get dead silence when I ask that question. I'm always worried that, wow, I didn't get my point across. I mean, it's one thing that Akio Morita used to tell me, because I was a speechwriter, so we write speeches, and he'd give them. And one of his tenets was that, "Remember, Shawn, if the audience doesn't understand what you're saying, it's not their fault, it's your fault. If the audience is," because he was a consumer electronics guy, "if the audience's TV only gets channel 7 and you broadcast on channel 4, no one's going to get your message. You have to dial your broadcast into the channel they can receive. Know your audience." And that stayed with me my entire life. There's different ways you present to a new team of game developers in Netherlands than you present to the budget committee at Sony Corporation headquarters. You just have to know your audience and dial yourself into that. It is on the speaker to make to make oneself known.
So when you describe your journey and your curiosity, it's very clear that 1, you have a growth mindset, and 2, you're very humble, which I'm sure makes you a very strong leader, because people need to see the humanity in the people that they're working with. And you also mentioned that you kind of steal from other people in an effort to learn. Can you describe your leadership philosophy? Did you steal from other people? Who did you steal from? And how would you describe yourself as a leader?
Someone asked me what my job as the chairman of Worldwide Studios was. Are you more of a creative leader, or are you more of like the pencil pusher, or you look at the numbers and all that kind of stuff? I said, my job is really simple as a leader of this constellation of studios, every studio making its own game in its own way. That's why we call it artist management in my game studios. It wasn't product management or development management. It was artist management, because every studio is like a rock band. And you manage Led Zeppelin in one way, but you manage U2 a different way. But you're both trying to get amazing output in both categories. So I describe my job as chairman. My job is to be out in front, clearing debris and rocks from the road. You guys are marching down this road. You can't afford to hit a pothole or run into a boulder, or if there's a tree trunk lying across the road, that's going to stop your progress. My job is simply to remove all the impediments, all the obstacles. Sometimes that obstacle is we can't get enough money. I'll take care of it. We'll go find some money. Sometimes the obstacle is the marketing department is really not supporting our game idea. Well, let me go and deal with that obstacle, see what we can get done. I am absolutely positive not part of the creative decision making in game development, except at the very beginning, when you have the green light process, because that's hard to achieve, and that requires management sign off. So I found myself very, very much involved in that bit. But once the thing gets a green light, I say get out of the way, let the studio do their job. So leadership is moving things off the road. Leadership is often a leap of faith, right? People say, oh, I want more data. I want more data. We need to have more data before we can decide on this thing. I'm up to 85%. I just need some more data before I can decide. I said, once you get 100% of data, that's not a decision. That's just an outcome, right? You have all the data here. So there you go. You have the answer. But we're 6 months later or we're 9 months later. And so now the opportunity is gone, even though we have the data to describe what we want to do with it. To my view, leadership is 30%. When I mean 30%, it's like once you get to 70% of the data, leadership is deciding to go based on 70%. It's filling that 30% gap where you don't have the data, but you just have to have experience, intuition, a sense of the market, an understanding of how far you can push people and how much you can get from them. So get to 70%, do all of your due diligence, and then the last 30%, that's what leadership is.
I really appreciate that perspective. And when you're talking about clearing the way for other people, it sounds like you are helping make decisions so that the rest of the company can be effective in doing their job. That's a very big responsibility. A lot of the people who I hope and think will listen to this podcast are people who aspire to be leaders, to be mentors, to have decision-making power. Can you talk about the human experience of having that level of responsibility and influence and power, and how you balance stress with inspiration? If you felt motivated, if you felt like it was fun, if you felt like you could only do that level of intensity for a certain period of time because it was so much. I'm just curious, when you've been in all these very high up positions, what did they feel like?
It does often feel like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. If you obsess too much on that, you will not be an effective leader. Sometimes, this may sound a bit flippant, I suppose, you just have to sit back and tell yourself, it's going to be okay. Even if this whole thing blows up and burns down, it's going to be okay. Even if I get fired, it's going to be okay. There will be another place to go. It's nothing here. Be not afraid. Should be the requirement for leadership is be not afraid, and trust people. Lean into their best intentions. I think people have a good heart in the main, 90% of the time. They don't want you to fail. They don't want to fail themselves. So believe in the goodness of others. Don't be afraid to make the decisions, and take some time off. You can get in that grinder and do 60, 70-hour weeks. And when you get to that point, sometimes you forget what the target is. You're just so consumed or subsumed underneath all the responsibilities that you're carrying. You kind of lose track of, what was I here for again? Or what are we trying to do? Constantly remind yourself of those things. What are you here for? What are you trying to do?
And in terms of that intensity, you mentioned very long hours. As you kind of moved up the ranks, can you talk about your experience with balancing your personal life and your work, especially with such a high level of responsibility? Is that something that you struggled with? Is it something that you had to think about in phases? And has that shifted as you've moved along in your career? I ask because I've talked to a lot of executives and CEOs who found that was a very big challenge, and that they said they were going to do it for a period of time, even if it was a decade, and then they were going to do something different and sit back a bit and change their life and have the things they didn't have before. Did you have to make personal sacrifices in some of these different roles? What did that look like, and how do you feel about it now?
I would probably do it differently if I had to do it over again. The theories and the precepts and the philosophies and the tactics or strategies, those would probably be the same. But I spent too much time away from my family. I spent too much time on the road. That was the wonder of the pandemic, is that we all realized, hey, you don't have to fly overseas every other week to get a thing done. You can just get on a Zoom call and achieve the same result. So, yeah, I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, especially in Tokyo, starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, finishing at midnight, that was just standard operating procedure back in the day. Japan is the poster child for too much overwork, and there was a lot of that then. I was glad to go to London in 1999 because it slowed down a little bit. People actually went for a pint at 5 o'clock and didn't go back to the office. So that was good to know that life could be like that. But I did. I probably traveled too much. I probably spent too much time away from my family. missed some sporting events or concerts that I probably should have gone to. I hope my children don't hate me now. You've got to really be considerate of that. But I can understand by the other people you've talked to. You tell yourself, I'm just going to do this for a little bit. I'm just to get through this. Just once this project's done, or once I move to that new department. But old habits are hard to break. And people have the expectation that, well, Shawn's always on his BlackBerry, so we can send him questions Saturday, Sunday, 2:00 in the morning. And whilst for a time there, I thought, this is amazing. Everyone thinks that I'm just switched on 24/7 because I don't sleep much anyway. And so I'm always doing this stuff. But it began to build the expectation that you could do that. Now, for example, I don't do any business correspondence on the weekends. I mean, I do sometimes, but then I use the that schedule send on email. So even though I wrote it Saturday morning, it doesn't go out till 8:00 Monday, just to make sure that people don't start to expect answers from me on the weekends.
So first, thank you for sharing that. I really hope that some of my peers hear that and feel inspired by everything that you're sharing, especially as most of the people that I knew in business school are going into very intense industries with very long hours. And even when I was an actor, you're working like 16-hour days and you literally live in a house with those people and you don't have a personal life. And it's very different. But I'm just curious, this is a topic that I think about a lot as I kind of build out my career, having space for a personal life, building a really fulfilling, financially stable and inspiring career. I'm just curious, you mentioned you would probably do some of those things differently. You'd have similar strategies, but maybe a different boundaries around work. Do you think if you went back in time and you cut some of those hours and put them into your personal life, do you think you would have achieved the same level of success that you achieved when you had that intensity? Or do you think that was kind of what was required to be in the position that you were in?
I think I would have been successful, but maybe in a different way. In fact, maybe in a different industry. As I mentioned earlier in our conversation, that I only applied for that one job back in 1987, and then 32 years later, retired and didn't have to apply for a job anytime in between. But I think a lot of that comes from people ask you to take new roles because they've seen you be useful somewhere. You've solved someone else's problem. You've done a thing where people said that was amazing what you did. And sometimes that is a product of just being available all the time. Being there for someone to say, oh God, we've got to rewrite this whole thing by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And you go, yeah, I can pull an all-nighter. I'll get it done. I'll have that whole thing done by 8:30. And you get this reputation as the person who gets stuff done, the person who can fix your broken thing. Every time I went to a new company, there's always a problem to fix. We just bought a studio. Go to England, integrate a studio. PlayStation 3 is blowing up the bottom line in Japan. Go to Japan and see if you can fix that. Go to San Francisco and start a company. Come over to the studios and try to get them aligned on some new development patterns. So I was always asked to go fix a problem or fix something that was broken. And they ask me, or they ask a person to do those sorts of things if they see that person having done a lot of stuff, having always been there, Johnny on the spot when you needed something done. But there's a personal price you pay for that, which is you don't have much time to yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a vulnerable thing to share, and I really appreciate it. What I hope people take from this conversation is listening to your story and seeing what about your story resonates with them and what characteristics they want to cultivate in themselves, and based on how you look back, how they should kind of cultivate their future. And speaking of looking back, when you kind of look back on your career, what are you most proud of? Is there a certain event? Is it the holistic journey? Is there a deal? Is it a role? Is it a feeling of kind of accomplishing everything you accomplished? What are you most proud of and glad that you pursued?
Well, survival. I'm very proud to have survived all of this. What am I proud? That's a hard one to answer, I guess, because the way I would answer it may not sound very, specific or inspiring. I was just proud of being able to go into these new situations, whether they be in Tokyo, London, San Francisco, assess the problem quickly, and motivate people to see what we need to do, get everybody on board with an idea, and then to just get in front of the team and run out on the field with it. It's that feeling of getting it. When we had the PlayStation Network was hacked on 4/20 in 2011, we had to take a decision very quickly. I was the COO at the time, and the CEO was this nice gentleman, Tim Schaff from Apple. He had joined Sony Interactive Entertainment as the president and CEO. He made the decision, like really quickly, just to shut the whole network down. Shut down a network with, what do we have at the time, like 80 million users, and literally pulling the plug from the wall because we didn't know exactly how far the network had been penetrated, where they were and what they were doing. The thing about network breaches and whatnot, people talk about, well, couldn't you identify and couldn't you find out with certainty what happened there? I said, look, if I come home and my piano's gone, I know instantly someone stole my piano. But if I come home, my piano's there, and someone says, has someone been in and taken a picture of your piano? I have no idea. I don't know, maybe. And that's what data is. You don't have to steal the data. You just have to copy it. So we made the decision at that time to turn down the network. And then we spent a grueling 3.5 months to rebuild it. Those were like 18-hour days. That was bedroll on the floor in my office kind of stuff. But those are proud moments because we had this huge calamity occur. And in moments like that too, who on your team is a keeper and who on your team may have just been sliding through. Disaster and calamity really brings out leadership skills in everybody on the team. And you know what your role is. You know what you have to do. You know the people are depending on you. You don't want to let other people down. I don't want to ever do it again, but there is moments like that where it just feels good to be on a motivated team, which has a central vision on where you need to go and just be part of the process of getting there.
And in terms of motivation and vision, since you're rallying everyone together during very challenging times, things come up, spur of the moment, and you have to fix it and be a decision maker, I imagine that you have to have a lot of self-confidence to, one, believe that you're making the right decision and to believe that your gut is correct in who to trust with the other decisions. How did you cultivate that confidence? I know you mentioned you ask a lot of questions, and I imagine as you ask more questions, you get more knowledge. But I'm just curious, one, what is your approach to building confidence? And what advice do you have for young people who maybe feel insecure with their value in the workplace and want to become a decision maker and want to be someone who can impart wisdom to other people and motivate people and inspire people during challenging times like you just described, but are struggling with that?
Mostly trial and error, to be honest, which is why you have to be an old man like me to have enough experiences to pull that kind of stuff together. Mistakes are not failure. Do not beat yourself up on your mistakes. Understand why you made the mistake. Oh, I missed one piece of data, or I didn't look over here, or I failed to try that. So know why you made it and move on. Don't wallow in it. And it's like, oh, I failed. It's gonna be the worst thing in my life. And no, pick yourself up and move. That's how we get where we're going to be. We learn so much from mistakes and failures. Don't try to erase them from your mind. Hold on to them. Those are your learning moments. You've seen companies in Silicon Valley who are on a growth rocket from, 2010, and then they hit a rough patch when the pandemic came, or they hit a rough patch in 07, 08, or even now with some of the tech collapse. A lot of those companies are struggling to deal with it because they've only known success. Their number go up was what they've been doing for the last 8-9 years. And once it hits a plateau, they don't know what to do with themselves. That's why you can look at a company like Apple. Why are they so resilient? They've had at least 3 near-death experiences as a company. They know what it means to look into the abyss. Other companies that were just growth rockets, when they hit a rough patch, they looked around the table and said, okay, who's dealt with this adversity before? I don't know, boss. We're just here to grow. And that's when you find challenges. That's when you see companies that, wow, it was such an enormous success story, and then it turned into abject failure. Is because you got to know what failure and mistakes look like so you can avoid them later. So I think people should embrace their disasters, embrace their failures, embrace their mistakes. You're going to learn so much from that. Don't let that define you. What defines you is picking yourself up and not making the same mistake twice. And if you keep making the same mistake over and over again, that is a problem for you. But don't make the same mistake twice. Pick up and move. And again, realize it's not the end of the world. This isn't, we're going to save the planet from alien invasion. It's a job, and you're going to do the best you can, and you're going to try to make some success. And it's not that big a deal, really.
Great lesson in cultivating resiliency and bouncing back, which I really appreciate. I'm curious, speaking of resiliency, the job market's very, very hard right now. We've seen so many layoffs in gaming, and I am repping my PlayStation jacket. For those that don't know, I interned at PlayStation during my MBA. I had the best experience in the world at PlayStation.
Great.
Loved the company. But the gaming industry is very hard to break into right now. A lot of people are being laid off. Same with tech, same with media. We see teams being consolidated. I'm curious what advice you have for people who want to enter the gaming industry, whether they're coming out of college or a business school or just pivoting from one job to the next. If they're really passionate about gaming or tech, but they're having a very tough time breaking into those fields, do you have advice on pursuing that? Because one thing I've heard is I have a lot of peers who are going into kind of adjacent industries, building skills, hoping that the market settles and then they can pivot back. And that's something I've considered. I've also been offered 2 jobs in the last 2 years that then a week later were rescinded because of layoffs and hiring freezes. So trying to also cultivate that resiliency myself. But what advice do you have for people that want to get into these industries or are having a hard time?
A couple of things, to say around that. And yes, it's the last 24 months has been brutal in the gaming sector and in tech in general. I'm here in San Francisco, so I see it all around me. I think it's important to remember. Well, when I speak with college students, a lot of them say, I want to get in the gaming business, but I don't know how to code, and I'm not a graphic artist, and I can't write a story. I said, well, that's fine, because the gaming industry is exactly that. It's an industry, right? You can be an accountant and be in the gaming industry. You can run supply chain management. Doesn't sound like games, but they're in every gaming company has someone doing that job. HR, marketing, IT, everything. So there's no barrier to entry by discipline to get into the gaming industry. If it is on the creative end of things, which is a difficult place to get into now, largely because I think a lot of gaming companies overhired during the pandemic. They saw revenue in the gaming sector go up from anywhere from 20 to 23% year on year, and they just bulked up for it. They thought this is going to be a juggernaut, I suppose, not understanding that pandemics normally taper down, and at some point people are going to go back outside, play baseball, go to bars, go on dates, and not be buying more DLC for their RPG at home kind of thing. So I think some of the layoffs we've seen is like a corrective against that. If you look at the total number of people working, I bet right now it's not any lower than it was in, let's say, 2018 or 2019. So there's been a recalibration around that. That said, if you can't get into a gaming studio, then look at adjacent industries. Because the whole world of interactive entertainment, well, we had been just a cottage industry for 40 years. We make games and, you play them at home and they go ding, ding, dong, and that's great. But it's becoming, the whole field of interactive is now bleeding into film and television arts. I mean, where would The Mandalorian be without the Unreal Engine? And that's what's coming out from that. So there's work you can do in adjacent industries, which will keep your skill set, growing and live. At some points you can maybe move into the gaming space, but be active, be doing things. If you can't get a paid role somewhere, see if you can find a way to get on with a startup team. And if you can do it, just take an equity gig. Like don't pay me a salary, just give me, 0.5% of the game or the company when it takes off. See if you can accommodate that. Watch your home finances. make sure that you're making enough money to survive. But again, be not afraid, because this thing keeps changing. And the interactive entertainment industry is not going away. It's just getting bigger. It's touching onto more things. We talked about film and television. It's touching now into retail. There are a couple of companies during the pandemic, big fashion brands who did, 3D realized environmental, whether in VR or not, fashion shows because New York Fashion Week wasn't happening and Paris Fashion Week wasn't happening, but they had to get their products out in front of the consumers. So I think CPG are looking further into how can interactive increase their scope of business. Car manufacturers want to give you a 3D virtual test drive in your living room with a headset. That's all built on the back of interactive entertainment technology. So this is not only a growing sector for the gaming piece, but the skill sets that we're picking up and we're developing here are going to apply right across the spectrum in a huge number of industries across the world.
It's very inspiring to hear, and I hope it gives people hope that even if now's not the time for that person, for me, for anyone to enter the industry in that specific function, just hearing that your advice is to even just look at something adjacent and build those skills and find something that you're still interested in, still inspired by, but that you can eventually pivot back. I hope it validates people that there's not one way to do this. You don't have to enter in when you're 22 and then that's the only way to get in. You can build skills in something else and then go to what you really want to be in. On the topic of job advice, I have to ask you about your views on how AI is going to impact the workforce. And in the sense of kind of giving people career advice, if you were a young person and you were deciding what to study, or you're an early career professional and you're deciding what skills to build and to cultivate, we talked about resiliency, we talked about asking questions, but where would you invest your time in terms of skills? Would they be more technical? Would they be more creative? Would they be more data focused? Would they be more people focused? I think people are, me included, are feeling lost on where to invest our time as everything is changing so quickly. So as the workforce is being disrupted, where do you think young people should focus their time?
Now, this may sound like a boomer thing to say, but I am a baby boomer. I got asked a few years ago to go back to my alma mater, the University of Notre Dame in beautiful South Bend, Indiana. I was asked to go back there and speak to the business college. All the people in the business college love to hear the chairman of Sony Studios come over. And I said, the folks at the business college already have kind of an idea of where they want to go, which firm they want to attach to when they get out of school and that kind of stuff. I would rather go and speak to the College of Arts and Letters, because as an American Studies graduate myself, that's all I have is a BA in American Studies. I want to go to the College of Arts and Letters and talk to the humanities majors, the philosophy majors, the French literature majors, and stand in front of them and say, again, be not afraid. There is work for all of you. And the skill that you have here in the College of Arts and Letters, which I value above all skills, is your ability to communicate, to persuade, to argue, to make a case for something, to use your words to impart knowledge to another person in an effective way. That's the biggest decline I've seen in my 32 years in business, is business correspondence, communication, the way people want to pitch their presentation. Oh my God. Communication skills are in rapid decline across the business sector. And some of them are just being replaced by a kind of consultant speak or something taken right out of, Fast Company magazine, or some weird kind of very ineffective or imprecise prose that goes along with it, but it looks flowery. It looks like you use a lot of words. I mean, you see companies have mission statements. Here are our 13 core principles. Well, if there's 13, it really can't be core, can it? I mean, come on, 13? The ability to communicate an idea, I think, is the hallmark of a great liberal arts major or an English major or anything like that. And that's the skill I would ask people to really work on. If nothing else, read more books, write more articles, get your writing down. Writing is such an important skill, and people don't pay it enough attention. And that's why you look at AI, and is AI going to come in and solve for that problem? It will in a lot of places. I think, I started my career writing press releases. And there was such a pro forma sense of what a press release should look like. It was like it was written by AI back in 1987 when I was writing them. So I think those kind of functions, some marketing functions, some communications functions, will be swept up with AI, which will be a faster way to get it done. But I don't think, what was it, McKinsey or BCG or one of those consultancies said by 2030, 60% of all games will be written by AI. No way that's true. AI, it's by its very nature, it's a rearview mirror. It's just like a huge rearview mirror with every piece of knowledge in the world that's happened until this moment at its disposal, but nothing in the future. AI can't see the future. It can predict trends. It can give an indication of maybe things are going to go that way, but it really can't predict that future. And that'll be the difference. AI could not have written like Christopher Nolan's Inception movie. There's no way you could pull that out of AI generated. But Fast and Furious 10, probably, because it's just all based on the other Fast and Furious movies before it. So I've characterized AI when I get that question from people. I said, ChatGPT, for example, it's like an overeager intern. You can snap your fingers and say, give me 10 pages on, paint primer in 1930s. It can do it. It can just generate it on request. But like an intern, it makes mistakes because it doesn't know everything. And so as long as you treat it that way, as long as you look at your 4-page output from ChatGPT and you read it for meaning, you'll find where it's made mistakes and it has to be corrected. I think we're a long way from Skynet and having the machines taking over the world. But it's going to be a force multiplier in the business world. It will help 2 people do the work of 20 by speeding up some things that are just rote or repetitive or reflexive. But I don't think it's going to replace any of the job than perhaps my old job of writing press releases.
I genuinely can't tell you how much that advice means to me personally and how much it would have meant to me both when I was in college, when I was a musical theater major, and when I was in business school trying to figure out what made me unique and what my skills were. Because when you're in business school, so much of what you're doing is the quantitative portion. And what I felt I brought was not the modeling. It was the wanting to talk to people and to communicate and to express different ideas and to present and to connect. It was all the things that I loved about acting. So I think that advice will help people, not just who want to be in business, but also artists who maybe want to do something else, but don't realize that their skills can be transferable to other industries. It took me so long to figure that out because those are skills that are not always cultivated in traditional business environments. So I feel like those students in that college were very lucky to have you come there and share that. And I'm going to send that to everyone who has a non-traditional background because I think it's really important that people realize that skill sets are different and that is a really strong one to cultivate.
Well, it is kind of in vogue now too, isn't it? The idea that business is storytelling. There's even courses, I think, at UCLA on how to be a business storyteller, whatever that means. But it is. And I used to say that years ago when people would come to a budget meeting. They'd show up with their budget, they throw it up there. And in the first quarter, I said, don't tell me that. What's the story? Tell me the story. Get me excited about your division, your department. What's the amazing things you do for us that would want me to give you a 20% bump in your budget? We'll do the numbers at the end. Give me the story. Draw me in, excite me. Because everything you do is a story. Because that's how humans are motivated and driven. We're driven by storytelling. We love it. We love sitting around the campfire and hearing scary stories about the woods. We love sitting there and having someone tell me that crazy bachelor party story that happened last weekend. Wow. No one died? That's amazing. That's what drives us as human beings in business, where we just try to extract and extrude just the quant piece with the idea that the data will tell us everything. Oh, one of the phrases I really hate in business is, are you data-driven? Are you data-driven? I said, no, why would I be data-driven? I think data is important. I use data to confirm things. I may have a hypothesis or a supposition, and I'll look at some data to see if it bears out that over time, when these things were put in place, these outcomes occurred, and I could suggest then that if I did it again, it would happen again. But I don't look at a whole bucket of data and go, what's my new product going to look like? Mortensen said this as well, at Sony. He said he didn't believe in market research. And I said, why is that? He said, no market research in the world would have given you the Walkman. Because people don't know what technology can do. So how can you ask them what do they want technology to do for them? They don't know what the limitations are. No one would have come up with the idea of, well, if you had really small headphones and plugged into a cassette player and had good battery life and you could take it on an airplane. No, that's got to come from the creative mind, from the engineers who are always there trying to solve problems. So asking people what they want is not a good use of your time because people don't know what they can get. I think Steve Jobs said something very similar to that. So I don't like the data-driven concept. I like data is just another tool. It's as important as intuition and instinct as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. I think it's a very unique one. And I feel like I've heard many different takes on this, especially coming out of business school. Talking about storytelling too, and I have taken classes that were more focused in that, is very invigorating. And I do think it connects people in a different way. To pivot the conversation a little bit, a big focus of this podcast is helping people do things on their terms and define what success means to them. Can you talk to us about something that you did that was totally on your terms, maybe something unconventional, an unconventional decision or path that you took that led you to a certain place? And do you think that contributed to your success?
There are a couple of examples, but I can't speak of them. And did work out, but it's like the question around negotiations and how do you negotiate, and how do you win? Well, the first thing with negotiation, you just got to remember the one basic fact of a negotiation is who wants it more, because that will show where the energy is coming from. Do you want to sell it more than they want to buy it, or they want to buy it more than you want to sell it? And that changes the leverage balance, right? If they want to buy it more than I want to sell it, then I have the leverage, right? Because you came to me, you want to buy my thing, and I'm going to, jack up the terms, jack up the price, or that type of thing. When you go to a company and, you're interviewing a job or something, it's very important that you do your homework before you get there. You really have to show them that you've looked as hard into them as they're going to be looking into you in this interview. You have to really understand where that company is going to position yourself in a place that says, I can help you get there. I see you concentrating on this. The company wants to go there. You've put this money into this thing I just read about. That's the kind of place where I can come in because these are my skills and that's what I can do to apply against that. Push yourself in there to make it a situation where they want you more than you want the job, if you can get there. They want you to come in and do that thing. So you've really looked into who they are and what they are. I say that to people who are have studios, right? You have a small studio and some big fund wants to come in and buy your studio from you, and you're all excited because they're talking millions and millions of dollars. And I tell the studio people, okay, that's great. They're going to do due diligence on you as a studio and your bottom line and your financial situation. But you've got to do diligence on them too. You have to know where that money's coming from. Seriously. You want to know, and what is their long-term expectation to stay funding your business? Are they just a fund that came together 6 months ago and trying to buy their first studio? Do you want to be their experimental buy? I don't think so. Is it a huge company that if you get bought in, you're just going to get swept into the maelstrom of all the other companies they bought? Well, if you just want the buyout money, the exit, then that's fine. But otherwise, you don't have to take the buyout if you don't feel comfortable with the partner. It's a two-way street. You don't have to just suffer the offer that's been put in front of you and sell your company out to a person who just seems to have money. So there's a lot of back and forth around that. I don't think I've really answered your question.
No, honestly, it's a really interesting topic, and it's a good lesson in not being desperate and knowing your power, even when you're the little person. I think it's a really good lesson. And I think it's something that people learn usually after they've made the decision to go for the thing that they were desperate about. But what you're saying is, first of all, do your research. I imagine it applies not just to deals, but also to jobs. If you're really, really desperate for a job, you lose most of your negotiating power.
Oh, completely.
Yeah. And if you really want to be bought by a big company and that's your biggest dream, and it's less about who's buying it and their value set, you will probably sell it for less than what you should get. So I think it's a really good lesson in creating your autonomy and also having, I remember when I took negotiations, it was like your BATNA, your best alternative offer.
Never heard that one before.
It's talking about how you should always have another option, because if you want something so desperately, you lose your leverage. And is that kind of how you approach negotiations in general? Like, do you go in and how do you stay not desperate when you do really want it? Is it kind of psychological if you do want something? Do you have a specific approach to negotiations?
Don't enter into negotiation unless you're willing to walk out. Don't go in there and saying, I've got to get this deal. To your point, Jane, you've just lost your leverage, right? You have to be able to walk in there, say your truth, listen to theirs, and, guess if there's a place to meet in the middle, but never be afraid to say, I'm not feeling it. This isn't going to happen. Appreciate your time. Thanks for your interest. I've got to go. Sometimes I've used that tactic, and then the other side of the table goes, wait. I'm sure we can work out something. And I said, I don't think so. I think what you've said up till now, what I'm willing to do, there's just no meeting there. And sometimes you walk away and, that's it. Or sometimes the other side of the table goes, well, how about this? And, it's kind of a tactic, but it's also the truth. You have to be able to walk away. If you find yourself in a room and you can't walk away, then just don't negotiate, just capitulate. Take what they're going to give you, because you really have no say in the matter. So believe in yourself. And don't walk into that room until you believe in yourself. But also, talk to people. Again, it's the asking of questions. I'm going to apply for a job at this company. And, I know Mary. Mary works there. Let me check out with her. I had a friend of mine who took a job with a company in Japan. And he joined it on a Monday and he quit on Thursday. And he wrote me, he called me and said, this happened over there. And I just said to him, why didn't you call me? I know 4 people who have quit that company, and I could have told you exactly why they did and save you all the heartache. Answers to some of your questions can come from places you wouldn't even believe. So, reach out, ask questions, look for a bigger knowledge set than the one you personally possess. But yeah, negotiations are tough. The other lesson about negotiations is don't negotiate against yourself. I see that a lot. People putting out their offer and then getting a response, not a counter offer, but just a negative response, and then remolding the offer again and again. And once you do that 2 or 3 times, there's no incentive for the other party to say anything at all. I'll just wait here until you self-negotiate yourself into a position that I can take. So make sure that offer, counter offer. Yeah, it's like tennis. Don't hit the ball twice. Just make sure you get it across the net. Now it's on them.
One thing you mentioned that definitely sticks with me is talking about believing in yourself. That's something I wish I had learned earlier, especially when I got to business school and was like deer in the headlights. Will I make it through? If I could go back and talk to my younger self, I would tell myself it's going to be okay and you will get through it. And challenges build resiliency, like we've discussed. Mm-hmm. If you could go back in time, magical thought experiment, and tell the younger version of yourself who was just about to graduate college some words of encouragement or advice, what would you say?
Well, a lot of the things we talked about today, it's a scary place when you're coming out of university. I was there with everybody else. It's like, get a job, go to grad school. And I didn't like that choice. I thought that was a false choice. Get a job, go to grad school. There must be another way. And the other way for me was, or find some government-sponsored programs that'll send you to small prefectures in the outskirts of Japan to work with the local board of education for 2 years. That was a real thing, and I found that. So I got to go to Japan for 2 years, worked for the local board of education, wrote a paper on the state of English education in that prefecture. I'm sure no one read it, but that's okay. I got to go to Japan. I got to refine my Japanese language skills. I got to avoid that get a job, go to grad school dichotomy, and gave me a couple of years to think more about what I wanted to do. And after that, I realized I don't want to go to grad school. I'm just done with the school thing. I need to go work. Well, what skills do you have? I'm an American Studies major. I want to pay me to learn about Herman Melville and Mark Twain? No? Okay. What else do I have? Oh, I speak Japanese. Bingo. The most valuable thing I got from my 4-year degree at the University of Notre Dame is the ability to speak Japanese. And there you go. Everyone has their own secret skill or superpower that may be not obvious in how they're approaching the workforce. But maybe it is. Maybe you're a concert pianist, and that gives you interest in the world of music and working with orchestras, working with others, the arts. Maybe that role at MoMA would sit right with you because you're already sort of inured in the world of music and art. Even though you do have your CPA or whatever, some sort of qualification from education. Look inside. Everyone's got a skill or an interest or something you can drive against that makes you different from other people.
So this is exactly why I wanted to have you as the first guest. Truly. I think it's so important for people to think about what makes them unique and special, whether it's to figure out what makes you different than everyone to get into school or to enter the workforce or to be a better person in the world or to be more confident. So I really appreciate that message. As we round this conversation out, we've spent a lot of time kind of looking back on your career. I want to look forward. In this next stage of your career, what do you hope to achieve and what motivates you now?
What I hope to achieve is to take some of the things I've learned, the easy way, the hard way, whatever way I learned them, and work with people like yourself, Jane, and others who are out there just trying to help us all move our way around this big blue marble, right? We change the world one person at a time. I've got no huge aspiration to lead anything that's more than 10 people ever again. I think that part of my career is over. Right now, if I can just give a handful of people a word of advice or a bit of a skill set that helps them go out and do their big third of their life, between school and retirement, that makes me feel good. I think the nonprofits I work with, particularly Girls Make Games, we're doing a lot around introducing young women from the ages of 8 to 16 into coding to make game demos. We found out that it's much easier to get elementary school children excited about coding when you're talking about, if you said, do you want to create an air traffic control system? Most of them would say no. But do you want to create a racing game with unicorns? Everyone says yes. So I see that kind of coding opportunity as like the gateway drug to STEM for elementary school kids. And so Girls Make Games is there to help bring women into that who are underrepresented demographic inside of game development. And it also serves my bigger purpose, or one thing I'd like to see happen is I'm committed to the idea that to get more people playing games, we need to get more people making games. And when I mean more people, I mean not the same people have been making games for 40 years, which are largely male. They largely fit into a Caucasian or Asian demographic. And so we kind of make the games that we like. And in order to grow the gaming market, we need to have more variety out in the field. We talk about gaming being a $250 billion global business. The majority of that, I think, is mobile gaming, which I don't know much about. But in the console world of Xboxes and Nintendos and PlayStation, that number consistently sort of stops at 250 million gamers. You ladder up all the different consoles. So that means most of the planet doesn't care about Grand Theft Auto. Most of the planet doesn't care about Call of Duty or Fortnite or Warcraft. But if the industry stays trapped in their current mindset and their current makeup, if you will, and we just continue to make more of those games, we're not going to get more people playing because everyone else has already said they're not interested. So I think with initiatives like Girls Make Games and to get more people making games, so more people are playing games, that's what I'm putting my energy in now. I'm not involved with any like direct game development projects, but I'm involved with some adjacencies that can help bring more people into the world of game creation.
Well, what's very clear from this conversation is that you are very motivated to give back. You mentioned wanting to give advice. You just did that for an hour. So many amazing and very inspiring messages that I'm really excited to share with people. And also, this was personally inspiring. I truly can't thank you enough for your time and for your thoughtfulness in this conversation. You were the perfect first guest, and I'm really excited to kick this off. And I'm grateful that I got to do the first episode with you. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much, Jen. And your efforts are inspiring me as well. I'm so delighted to see another generation of young leaders who are out there just to help a brother and a sister out when they need it.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Your Career Unscripted. If something about this conversation inspired you, I'd love to know. Feel free to message me on LinkedIn at Jane Bernhard if there's a guest you'd want to hear from, or if there's a type of background you'd like to learn from, and I'll do my best to make it happen. If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe to my Substack and socials, follow Texas Immersive Institute, and check out TXI's Patreon at patreon.com/Texas Immersive for more thought leadership on the immersive field. And of course, please share the episodes with anyone who you think might find them helpful. See you next time.